So about a month ago, I did a video talking about each of FGO's Part 1 stories and kind of ranking them and giving my thoughts for why I enjoyed certain parts of the story or why I didn't enjoy other parts of the story. And some of you guys really seem to like that, and I do enjoy doing more discussion videos about like the lore for FGO and about the servants, not just the gameplay. In fact, I have some other videos kind of lined up where I just want to talk about some general FGO characters and, well, their actual characters, their motives, who they are, stuff like that may be coming, but those obviously take a little bit more time than just breaking down the gameplay, so be patient on that if you're looking forward to it. But in this video, we're going to be breaking down Epic of Remnant, or Part 1.5 for FGO's story, because I told you guys that I would go on to do 1.5 and then part 2, and then I'm sure Ordeal Call and all the other stuff that'll unfold after that I'm going to cover, in the next 8 years as that starts to unfold, right? As we slowly wait for story chapters. But yeah, this is going to be a bit of a longer one, so make sure you kind of like strap in, sit down, or at least it should be longer than my usual content because I have a lot to say about 1.5 especially. It was very hit or miss for me. It was either really good or it was really bad, to say the least. But make sure you strap in, leave a like on the video, comment your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know how you would rank the Epic of Remnant stories, and let's go ahead and just start getting right into this. So we have Shinjuku, we have Agartha, we have Shimosa, we have Salem, and some people do forget that Seraph actually is a part of the 1.5 story. Like BB and all of them were a part of the whole wallpaper thing that they put out there. It's intended to be a part of the whole thing. It's just because it's not an official story chapter, right? It was an event that is now in the gold prism shop for you to play now. Like, you can kind of go back and play it. It often does get kind of forgotten about, but it is part of the 1.5 story. And let's just go ahead and get it right out of the way. This is literally the best part of 1.5. I think hands down, bar none. This is one of the best experiences that you can have front to back with one of the 1.5 stories, especially if you played CCC, because if you haven't played Fate Extra CCC, it's very similar to the story of Seraph in 1.5, except you journey with either Nero, Tamamo, Nameless / Emiya, or Gilgamesh, right? And a lot of the same events transpire. You'll deal with BB, you'll deal with Kiara, all of that good stuff. But the unique thing about the Seraph event in 1.5 is that instead of getting one of your standard servants, which you may remember we were supposed to go in with Nero, Tamamo, and Emiya, but they got lost, as we were entering, and they got hijacked. And instead we get to go journey with Melta Lilith as our main servant. Now, a lot of you guys may know that I already really like Melta Lilith, but a lot of that came from this actual event, because instead of journeying with a normal servant, we got to journey with one of the enemy servants that we got to fight in CCC, and I just thought that was absolutely fantastic. Also, just getting to see Kiara kind of scheme on her own without the assistance of Hans, kind of just doing her own thing, because if you haven't played CCC, it's basically Hans assisting Kiara the entire time and helping her out with the whole scheme, whereas this time Kiara's kind of acting on her own. It's just interesting to see that she ends up somewhat in the same spot, and even starts getting BB to assist us, because in CCC, Kiara basically eats all the Sakura 5 people, and instead this time we actually have BB available to help us deal with Kiara. But it's just, I think, the big selling point of having Melta Lilith as the main servant and getting a different perspective for the Seraph story, I just absolutely loved. It also just felt like one of those stories that had a lot of thought put into it, whereas some of the singularities, even in 1.5, Babylonia, Camelot, some stuff that I do actually like some of the later Part 1 singularities, even they can have some kind of goofy moments that might feel out of place, that you can definitely tell they just kind of needed to pad out and add extra missions for gameplay reasons, not story reasons. Seraph doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of that. It feels very tight. There's not a whole lot of extra scenes that I'm like, we could have really did without that. Especially even the post-series stuff I thought was very interesting, because we kind of deal with Kiara, and then BB's like, oh, well, a rogue version of myself is kind of going haywire. We should probably go deal with that. And so if you're someone that didn't get to play CCC, you still get to kind of deal with an evil BB, quote unquote, I suppose. So I just think everything was very, very interesting in that. And even little nods here and there to even just the post-event missions where you could take down the different Neros and they would swap classes. Same thing for Tamamo and Emiya. I thought all that stuff was really cool. Just little details like that were super, super neat. I even like the idea that they kind of made new lore for Emiya Altar as well, because in Shinjuku, Emiya Altar was just kind of there. He wasn't really, a central part of the story for me. Like, he just kind of was like, oh, you know what, never mind, I'm gonna help you guys take down Moriarty. I'm gonna, just swap teams real quick. It kind of was just doing his own thing, where at least in Seraph they were like, no, 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 no. Emiya Alter is like the guy that is like hunting down and trying to kill Kiara, but he got corrupted in doing that. And I just think that's really, really cool. So, I think we'll all just generally agree that Seraph pretty much goes at the top for Epic of Remnant, because it's just some good stuff. Now, the number 2 slot was very hard for me because I really like Shimosa and I really like Shinjuku, but I had to eventually give it to Shinjuku just for the part that, like, you guys know that I really like Saber Alter and I really like Jean Alter, right? So the fact that both of them are very prevalent in this singularity definitely did help a lot. Although Jalter wasn't as active as I would have liked her to be, because she kind of gets taken out a bit early, I think, but they definitely make up for it with the very cute, like, dance sequence at the very end. Lasengel, do me a favor and give me that dress, please. I need that as a costume. I know it's not too different from, like, her 3rd ascension, but there's little differences here and there, and I just want it, right? Just give it over, hand it over, bub. I want it now. But yeah, I think kind of sacking Jalter, not getting to spend as much time with her, did allow us to flesh out our relationship with Salter a little bit more, because Salter, for all intents and purposes, we kind of just met in Fuyuki, and she was like, oh, just generic bad guy. She was like, I'm standing here to take you guys down, blah, 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 right? And then in Shinjuku, you get to see kind of a different side of Salter, and I really enjoyed that a lot. It also had the effect that Babylonia had on me, where when Babylonia was coming out, I had no intention of summoning for Quetzalcoatl, but then by the end of reading the story, I was summoning for Quetzalcoatl until I got her. The same thing happened with me and Moriarty. Like, I had no intention of saving or summoning for this guy, but then I read the story and I was like, this guy is really cool. Like, I want this guy in my Chaldea, and unfortunately, I still have not got him. I'm still chasing after him. Hopefully one day I'll get him, but I think the whole, like, scheme of Moriarty is real nice, because it's kind of got like a grand thing to it, where, like, not like grand servant, but like a grandiose type thing. Let me make that distinction, because if you say grand in relation to FGO, people are going to think you're talking about the grand servants, but I'm just meaning like it's grand, or like it's kind of a spectacle, right? Where he's like, oh, I'm going to shoot this giant barrel thing and blow up the planet, right? For whatever reason, right? It's FGO, all the villains want to blow up the planet, right? Apparently that's just the thing. But I did like that it was, I don't know, it kind of felt more rough towards the end, I guess, just like having to fight Moriarty, because it did feel like you got to build this really nice connection with him throughout the entire singularity, and I just thought that was really, really cool. And I know some people are not gonna like this, but people always are like, oh yeah, King Hassan is Gramps. For me, it's like Moriarty is Gramps, because I felt way more of a connection to someone like Moriarty than I ever did to Hassan, so I feel like I kind of got that character, so it also just was kind of cool for me that I kind of found the Gramps character for FGO that I never really got in Hassan. Just didn't really hit the same chords for me, but I really thought Moriarty was really cool. Plus, just little things, like little lore bits of, like, tying up, say, what is his name, Shakespeare, and then, like, using his, like, writing to create, like, mobs for us to fight. If this was written nowadays, I think we'd have, like, more unique looking enemies for those Shakespeare bosses, right? Because I just don't think they were there with FGO at the time. That's why they were like, oh, we'll just use like a red Springen for like this thing. But I think we would have gotten like really cool unique enemies if they did, like, if they went back and kind of reworked some of the enemy model designs. But I think, it just kind of shows off that, yeah, like, Moriarty was like a very clever villain, and like he kind of knew how to utilize things. And Sherlock also seems very competent during the singularity, disguising himself as Edmond Dantes to make sure that he doesn't really bring any suspicion to himself. But then Moriarty's like, I'm 2 steps ahead of you. And I like the back and forth between both of them. I've always liked Sherlock Holmes and like the detective stuff, so it kind of just hit me in a nice place. I got the waifus that I really like, and I found like some really cool characters in FGO that I was not expecting to like. I think that's the main thing for me, is that Shinjuku always hits me when I reread it, because they're characters that I never thought I'd really be all that interested in, and then I got super engrossed in it. So I did like it a whole lot. Although there's like weird things like the Phantom of the Opera, Christina thing, I didn't really care too much about all that, so that's whatever. And then, as I mentioned when talking about Seraph, Emiya Alter is just kind of like there during Shinjuku. Like, he's not really doing much. Like, he's like, all right guys, I'm gonna go take these dudes out, and then he just disappears forever, and then he comes back at the very end, is like, all right, I'm gonna help you guys bring down Moriarty. I'm like, where were you for the last like 20 chapters, bro? Where have you been? But other than that, I think it's really, really tight. So that should go, or there's no spoiler in saying that like Shimosa is going to be coming right after Shinjuku, because I mentioned that they were very close for me. I do like both of these very, very similarly. I just think Shinjuku edges out a little bit. But Shimosa, all I can say is like a very gas singularity. I can't say it's like the most deep, well-written thing, but it's just really, really cool. Like, Shimosa is just you taking Musashi and basically just having a bunch of Dragon Ball fights. Like, you're just like, all right, Musashi, go fight this guy. Okay, now go fight Tomoe. Okay, now go fight Raiko and Shuten. Like, you're just going all over the place, fighting all these people with Musashi, having these big epic fights, and you're also like growing Musashi as you go along, right? Because you have, you know, the alive version of Musashi who hasn't mastered all of her swordsmanship yet, but you're going through with her and you're kind of helping her grow to like the legendary swordsman of Musashi that we all know and love today, right? And I think that's really sick. It does also introduce people like Muramasa, who we like waited for what, like 2 years, has like one of the best OSTs in the game, has one of the coolest scenes in the game. I thought that was absolutely sick. Shiro Amakusa as like the Avenger final boss, I thought was kind of cool, but it's both cool and unfortunate that it's basically just set up for Domen's chapter, right, that we got in the Lost Belts, right? Like, the whole thing with Shimosa is just Domen doing like a trial run for what he wants to do in High Kill, right? So it's a little unfortunate that he was almost kind of like doomed to fail a little bit, I suppose. But even like towards the very end, I think you just have cool non-stop moments between, like, say, Kojiro fighting Musashi, and they have this very tight battle. I kind of wish they would have let you fully commit to saying who you would have had won the fight, because you can say that Kojiro won, or you could say that Musashi won, but then ultimately the game picks for you and chooses Musashi. And I only say that because I chose for Kojiro to win, because Kojiro is one of my favorite Fate characters. I just like him a lot. I know, I'm sorry for all the Musashi sims. I like her too as well. You guys saw me summon for her, right? And, you know, we did eventually get her, but, you know, Kojiro is still my GOAT, all right? That guy is super sick. But even then, I can't say that I'm mad that like Musashi ultimately wins, and I think she definitely deserves it, considering some scenes that she gets later on in like Lost Belt 5.2. She gets to do a lot of really cool stuff. Even in Lost Belt 1, Musashi gets to do cool stuff. So I felt like this was a very solid groundwork for kind of building the relationship with Musashi and Ritsuka, which I feel is very important because Musashi is prevalent in all of the Lost Belt chapters. Well, most of them, right? Like, she shows up to help us in Lost Belt 1. She's alluded to being there in Lost Belt 2. And then in Lost Belt 5, she comes in and has a very grandiose scene where she fights Chaos, right? Like, she's very prevalent in the Lost Belt chapters. And so I think giving her basically an entire story chapter for herself to then kind of make the player character, well, care about Musashi and our relationship with her, I think was very excellent, right? In fact, that's why, you know, just depending on any given day, I could swap these two around. Like, it just happens to be that, like, this particular day where I'm recording this video, I happen to like the kind of more grounded feel of Shinjuku a little bit more than like the bombastic nature of Shimosa. But if you were to ask me tomorrow or a week from now, I might flip them, right? Because I think these are both very, very good. And I know my NA players haven't really got to experience Trom yet, but getting this like Moriarty thing for Shinjuku is also very important for the Trom event, right? Because Moriarty appears there with his ruler form. So I feel like these were both very good groundwork singularities that they did that then get payoff in part 2 with like all the Lost Belt chapters and everything. That being said, now we kind of have the other two that are not quite as good. Now, I don't really think this is going to be any surprise that everybody's expecting Agartha to be at the bottom, but Salem being at 4, this was one of the ones that I thought could have been the best one for me personally, because if you know anything about me, I've talked about it a couple of times on stream and I've talked about it in the Discord, I really like Eldritch horror stuff, like the H.P. Lovecraft, like Cthulhu mythos, all of that stuff. I think it's very, very interesting. I think that stuff can be very cool when done properly. There are a lot of series that have kind of taken that original work for H.P. Lovecraft, which is not like, let's be honest, the original work for it's not like super deep or great or anything, but the ideas were pretty interesting, and then other people taking those can do very interesting things with them. I mean, most like every fictional series is going to touch up on some type of like cosmic horror setting or something related that's kind of like Cthulhu mythosy-esque, right? And when FGO was kind of getting around to it with an official chapter with Salem, because they kind of touched up on it with Summer 3 with BB and Nyarlathotep, right? And that was kind of cool, but again, it's a summer event, so it's still kind of a gag. It's like half serious, half kind of gaggy, funny moment. But Salem is an official chapter, and I was like, okay, this is really cool. We're actually going to start diving into this with this Salem story chapter, but to my dismay, we weren't really going to actually start really diving into it until we got the Van Gogh event. The Van Gogh event is pretty much what I wanted for an Eldritch Horror type series, right? Because it's all about that. That's like the main focus of what's going on there. Salem is just like a very bizarre, very weird chapter. Like, I don't hate the idea of doing the plays. I thought they were kind of interesting because I'm like, oh, we get to see like Sheba interacting with Solomon, and we get to see some stuff with like the Jean sisters. Like, that's all really cool and fine and dandy, but what does this have to do with anything that's going on? It's like, well, we're traveling performers, so we need to blend in, but I don't know. It was an interesting idea. I just don't think it was executed very well. And then towards the very end, they were like, oh, we're going to be using Yog-Sothoth for the Salem chapter. And for those of you guys that don't know, Yog-Sothoth is a very big deal in like Cthulhu mythos. He is the number 2 guy, if not the number 1 guy, right? Like there's, and I don't want to start a war in the comments down below, but you could have an argument between him and Azathoth, who's actually number 1. It basically comes down to like Azathoth is the guy that like dreams of reality, and then Yog-Sothoth put him to sleep, and that's where the whole debate kind of comes in, where it's like, well, did Yog-Sothoth like put him to sleep because he's scared of him, or did he put him to sleep so he could kind of do whatever he wanted, right? You could kind of, it depends on your interpretation, right? Like it kind of gets down to the nitty gritty. It kind of gets into the nature of like how a lot of the H.P. Lovecraft stuff is very vague and weird. So some writers have Yog-Sothoth being number 1. Most writers have Azathoth being number 1. But it's a very big deal nonetheless. I'm sure people in the comments down below will be like, no. I read in this one series and that this is blah, 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 blah. And then someone else in the comments can be like, well, I actually read this, so I think this is a good point. It's going to get into the weeds, because at the end of the day, when it comes to any of this cosmic horror stuff, it's usually like unknowable stuff that you can't be seen or can't be understood, and if you look at it, you go crazy, right? It's basically what it boils down to. Regardless, they broke out the big guy. They broke out one of the big guns, and then it was just kind of mid at the very end. I don't know. So it was particularly disappointing to me. I know Salem's not a hugely popular chapter in general, but it was especially disappointing to me for that specific reason, that I was like, oh my goodness, Fate could do so much cool stuff with like outer entities and stuff, and they just, I don't know, set some groundwork there, but didn't really capitalize it, right? They never really got to the punchline for, you know, this story chapter, and I don't know, it just didn't hit for me. Just didn't hit like it probably should have. But yeah, I know that's kind of a common consensus. Now, Agartha. I have not met a single person that read Agartha and was like, yup, I enjoyed that front to back. That was a good old experience. Haven't met a single person that has had that. I haven't met a single person that even likes Agartha. Like, let's back up from even thinking it's enjoyable or thinking it's good. I haven't even met someone that was like, I enjoyed that read. It took me so long to make this video compared to the like first FGO story one, because I had to push through Agartha. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I fell asleep a couple of times. Like, I'd be getting ready to like go to bed and I'm like, well, let me read like a story chapter, and then conk, like I just fall asleep. Like, I just couldn't do it. I had to continually kind of keep pushing through to do it, and then I finally got it done, and I was like, oh my goodness, thank you, sweet baby Jesus, that this is now finally over. Because it's just one of those things where, like, Scheherazade is not a servant that I really care about. I mean, Columbus is funny, but again, don't really care about him all that much. The whole, like, giant Herc thing was interesting, I suppose. I mean, it's big Herc. I mean, what do you want from me? The whole, like, it's not Drake altar, but you guys know what I'm talking about. It's like the Drake model with, like, the purple hair and the yellow eyes. I thought that was kind of a cool idea, but again, doesn't really, like, go anywhere. Unless we inevitably get like a costume for it in the future. Please, Lasengle, that's another costume I'd really like to see. And then the climax I just really wasn't all that interested in. I mean, even like at the very end, like what's her name? Scheherazade starts like bad mouthing like Romani and whatnot. I'm like, bro, come on. Like, you can't be bad mouthing the homie over here while you're just doing nothing, while you're literally cooking up absolute jack diddly squat right now. It's just not a singularity I really care for all that much, and it just feels like it's all over the place. I mean, you've got like baby man Wu Zetian over there. I'm already butchered that name. Then you've got like Astolfo and Chevalier hanging out with us, and you've also got Scheherazade. It just feels like one of the bad part one singularities, right? Where like you play like Septum or you play like London, and it's like just this jumbled up gobbledygook of like just a bunch of random servants that just don't really seem to have too many connections to one another. It just was not an enjoyable read for me, and I'm glad that I've read it once, and I hope I don't have to read it again for quite a long time. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm pretty sure we're all going to agree that like Seraph is number one, Shimosa slash Shinjuku is like 2, 3, right? Salem's definitely like 4, and then Agartha's 5. Like, I feel like this is pretty close to like the common consensus, because this is just correct. I think the only thing you could really play around with are these two. Now, if somebody really enjoyed Salem, I will love to read your comments in the comments down below, right? If you loved Agartha, please be Agartha's strongest warrior, because I need to see someone say that they enjoyed this thing, and you have to tell me why. Though you can't just be like, oh no. Agartha's like my second favorite because of X, Y, and Z reason. Like, you gotta give me reasons for why you actually liked it, all right? They don't have to be the most deep thing on the planet. Maybe you just really like Scheherazade. Maybe you just really think that like the Drake altar thing was super hot, and you know, if that's your reason, then by all means, you know, have at it. I know a lot of people really like Shimosa because they just really like Musashi, and you know what, fair play. If that's why it's your number one, I completely understand. I mean, again, I mentioned that like Shinjuku holds a lot of points for me because you just get to interact with Jolter and Salter a lot. I just said that I liked the both of them quite a bit, so you know, I can't fault you if you're just like, oh yeah, really liked Agartha because I liked Scheherazade. I'll just give you the thumbs up. It's your opinion, and you're allowed to have it, but I will definitely disagree. But with all that being said, I will catch you guys in the next one. Don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more future daily FGO content. I'll also be trying to bring in some discussion videos. I have a couple that are chalked up, and they should be coming out very, very soon. Well, not very, very soon. I guess in like the next, like maybe month, maybe a couple of weeks. We'll see. We'll see how this kind of vacation plays out for me, because I don't get back until Wednesday, and my free time is very, very limited, I would say right now, because everybody just wants to do something. But with all that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.